Hello, and welcome to the most fast-paced podcast you're going to listen to this year, any year. Because this is the Angry Sun Zone.
Whew.
I'm your host this week, Santo.
And I'm Sean.
And I'm Alex.
And today we're going to talk about the Fast, the Furious. But not that specific game because we haven't played it. We're going to talk about racing games.
Pew!
But before we get into that, we have something that, we need segment music for or something. For, Santo forgot to say something on last week's podcast. Last week we talked about Civilization. Go check that out if you haven't listened to it already. But one thing that I forgot to mention that was a very weird experience for me was when the Gathering Storm expansion released for Civ 6, they added Canada as a civilization. And reading how the Canada civilization worked filled me with some sort of weird... I got really defensive about it. Because is this racist? I can't tell. Because just alright, what does Canada do? Well, they have bonus resources from snow and tundra tiles, and they could build the hockey rink improvement. I got this weird feeling of nationalistic pride for my country.
Hey man.
Hey man, we're more than that, goddammit.
Hey, don't forget, special unit, the Mountie.
He builds national parks, and is more powerful when he's close to national parks. How does that work? So yeah,
I could make some jokes, but they would be in very poor taste.
Oh dear, yeah.
I am also diverting. I am purging all my thoughts.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a very strange experience. But you know what's not a strange experience? Playing a racing game. That's an experience that we've all shared. We've all played. Talking about a little bit beforehand, I think we played more racing games collectively than I think I originally thought we did.
Yeah. I think the thing is, up to this point, we've definitely been focusing more on genres that are either our all-time favorite kind of genres, or we've been on a bit of a turn-based kick lately, talking about a lot of turn-based games. But the other thing is that
we gotta talk about some other turn-based games.
Ooh.
U-turn-based games.
Yeah. The other thing is actually just as a genre, I would actually say that the racing game genre, it's been on a bit of a downturn. It's been a bit declining.
Bit of a bumpy road.
There's
going to be a lot of puns this episode.
Oh yeah, and they're not coming from me for once. Wow.
The genre, ran on a boost a while ago.
One thing that hasn't run out of boost in the racing games is the graphics. They always seem to be turned up to 11, along with attempted simulations of real driving mechanics and environments.
Yeah, that's how you tell when a new console comes out. You look at the racing game. What can this console do in terms of graphics? And it's just yeah, that car looks real good.
Yeah, the thing about racing games is racing games, I feel, have always looked better because something just the geometry of a car is so much easier to render. That you don't get the uncanny valley.
Yeah, not from the car. You definitely get the uncanny valley more from the crowd.
Yeah.
If they're not the static elements, that you'd expect to find on some sort of Nintendo World simulation.
Yeah, but a racing game, it's always they've always been sort of pushing at the limits of what the console can actually put out in terms of photorealism, and especially because the geometry is more simple. I think it allows the developers to focus a bit more on things like reflections and shadowing and lighting and making those look really good. One thing actually in particular I even remember, one of the racing games I played a lot of that I really enjoyed, Burnout Paradise. it was a bit ahead of its time in terms of calculating some sort of weird shadow setting about like ambient occlusion, I think it was, which at the time was a fairly high performance setting that a lot of games couldn't really implement very well. And it's just like this subtle shadowing effect that it just really bumps that photorealistic lighting. Ever so slightly.
You sound exactly like a marketing dude working for one of those big name console manufacturers.
And one other...
You hear that, marketing dudes? Reach out and, we can talk.
Yeah. One other thing that racing games do pretty well is that, like, a lot of them have good frame rates. Like, a good frame rate in a racing game is really important. So, for these games to be able to pull off just these, like, really good graphics as well as a solid frame rate, like, when they're able to do that, like, they're some of the best looking games out there.
And speaking of frames, a lot of games these days are great at simulating damage to the vehicles and the corresponding effects these will have on your driving capabilities.
Are they?
One of the car manufacturers let them. that was always the rumor.
I feel like destruction in racing games has really taken an arc. You see the early games, like, for example, probably one of the earliest is just weapons that affect gameplay mostly. Things like in Mario Kart, your classic shells, bananas, etc. But these days, a lot of especially the simulator games, if your car gets damaged, they're going to separately simulate the effects on the driving capability of your car versus ones that are just cosmetic. And then there are some games that take destruction to an extreme, and it is a central, integral part of the gameplay.
Yeah. But I think we should, I think we can get into some specific games now. Probably the first racing game that I spent any, like, amount of time into was Excitebike.
Oh, Excitebike.
You might not come to mind when you think of a racing game, but yeah, like, Excitebike's sick. Great music, had a track editor.
Yeah.
I was never any good at it, but when they released, like, the cart of Excitebike for 3DS or something like that, they released, like, a 3D, like, Excitebike Classics, and I'm like, oh yeah, Excitebike, and I played it, and I'm like, oh right, this game's really simple, but it's still pretty fun.
I have not played Excitebike. Was that a Super Nintendo game?
No, that was an NES game.
No, it was an NES game.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think the earliest one I played was the NES Mario Kart.
The SNES Mario Kart?
The Super Nintendo Mario Kart, rather.
Super Mario Kart.
Super Mario Kart! And, but the main racing game that I played was Super Mario 64. That was one of the first ones.
Mario Kart 64. You did this again.
I am just completely driving you guys nuts, aren't I? I'm gonna slip in Super into just about every game title that you can possibly imagine.
Super Mario 64 is actually a racing game.
Yeah.
It's all about those speed runs.
Yeah, well, no, like, you go on the slide and you...
But no. Yeah, Mario Kart 64, definitely way, way up there in terms of the... Not just the levels and the single-player experience, but, of course, the multiplayer and especially the battle mode, even though that's not really what I would call racing in any way, shape, or form. But also just the levels themselves having these cool little secrets that required skill to master, like on the Koopa Koopa Beach, making the ramps. And shortcuts tend to be a pretty big thing in a lot of different racing games where usually by either knowledge or skill, you'll be able to pull off something to save time. And that was something I was pretty obsessed with. In the final level, they had Rainbow Road, and there was a massive shortcut that you could take that would basically skip the entire lap if you did it right. And if you did it wrong, it would send you careening into the void. and you would suffer a pretty nasty time penalty and not be in a great place to attempt the shortcut again. And so it was kind of either a do or die thing. And I learned how to master it consistently enough that I could win the single-player Grand Prix that way.
Yeah. Nice, yeah. Yeah, I think... I'm trying to think of the first racing game I played, and I can't quite... It wasn't actually a SNES game. I think the first racing games I played would have been on the N64, actually. And there were a few that I played on that. My favorite N64 racing game was a game called Revolt.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, okay, so basically the concept with Revolt is that your car, it's an RC car.
Okay.
You start out with like electric RC cars, which are okay, and then as you progress through the campaign, you unlock gas-powered RC cars, which are way better. Or, well, they're harder to control, but can, higher top speeds, stuff like that. Very common dynamic in a lot of racing games for the higher top speed cars to have worse handling. One of the things I really liked about Revolt, though, was just that the courses were really cool, because you'd have, like, RC cars outside, on outdoor courses, you'd have, like, weird indoor courses, you'd, like, race through a bowling alley, and just, like, the level design was really interesting, where they took locations you would recognize from just, like, everyday life, and turn them into racetracks for RC cars.
That sounds really cool.
It also had a level editor, which I always love a racing game with a level editor, even though I'm pretty sure I have never made a good track to race on in any of those racing game level editors, but I always try. Nice. It's just fun to make courses.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Mario Kart 64, another classic.
Mm-hmm.
Diddy Kong Racing.
Diddy Kong Racing.
Now that's one of those gems, absolute gems.
Yeah, that game is so cool. You got your karts, you got your hovercrafts, and you got your planes. 3 different ways to race.
Yeah, I love that concept of having the multiple types of racing, and it even, honestly, was pretty balanced for the most part.
I was just going to say that, yeah. They did a good job of balancing it.
Yeah, it was like there wasn't an obvious. I think it definitely some courses leaned towards one or the other. Obviously,
well, some courses you could only use certain cars.
Yeah, but overall, it was actually like on the courses where you could use multiple types, it was fairly balanced. Surprising, also difficult. Also, Diddy Kong Racing had a very cool battle mode. I actually think it had a better battle mode than any Mario Kart game. It had, I would say, a better variety of items, and also better courses. Every time I think Diddy Kong Racing, I always think about the ice pyramid.
Ooh.
I don't know if I'll agree with you about the battle mode, but there was one mode in Diddy Kong Racing that was awesome, where everybody was in planes and they had to grab eggs from the center and bring them back to their nest.
Right, yeah, that was a
and then
cool
you could
mode
steal eggs from other people's nests as well. So that was a really fun mode.
That sounds awesome.
Jacking people.
Yeah, that was a really cool mode. And it was sort of interesting, yeah, because it's kind of like a battle mode, but it's also it's like a.
I mean, it's a competitive mode.
Yeah, but it's also like, really cool game. And I also just loved the way that they made the progression through the single player into like the nice little overworld and
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it had those freaking boss fights too.
Yeah.
Boss fights in a racing game. Where else?
I mean, Mario Kart DS also had boss fights in like one of its side modes.
Yeah, Mario Kart DS, the best Mario Kart, because it had the challenge mode.
Yeah.
It had all those different challenges. So it was, it just had the most stuff of any Mario Kart, and also had great tracks. It introduced the Retro Cup as well.
Yeah.
And it also was the first one with online play, even though the online play was questionable.
Definitely. Very questionable. Before we move on from N64 games, there's 2 other racing games of that gaming console that were really experience defining. For me, it was a simulator game called MRC Racing, which I'm pretty sure is one of those backronyms. So MRC had a total of 10 different vehicles to choose from, only 3 tracks, but the cool thing was, with each of those 10 vehicles, was that you had a massive amount of customization for the individual parts. You could tune them one way or another. You could give yourself, more, like, a lot tighter braking if you needed that, or you could equip brakes that were better for drifting. There was components that would work better for off-roading versus on-road conditions. And what was interesting was that each of the sections of these 3 courses had both on-road and off-road sections, and you could kind of choose between the two. The off-roading tended to be significantly more difficult. And so that was a big favorite. And as well, the other favorite was Lego Racer. Lego Racer was amazing.
I think that's one of the few racing games we have mentioned on the podcast before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Highly worthy of...
Shout out to the cave level with the apparently bumping music. We gotta mention that for the 3rd time.
Yeah, we gotta mention that. Yeah, we shouldn't look it up, though. It might actually be nowhere near as bumping as we remember.
Well, we should totally make a video going back to Lego Racers.
Oh, God.
And have a first-hand reaction to that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, another game series that I really liked from the N64 racing series, Extreme G and Extreme G2. Mm-hmm. Not sure if you guys played those, but I would essentially describe them as F-Zero with motorcycles. Like, it's motorcycle F-Zero. Super high speed, futuristic motorcycles with weapons. I tried going back and playing it, and I was actually extremely disappointed. It was a game that I definitely played a ton of when I was a kid, and it does not hold up at all.
Man, before we get too far into the future, I got a few older ones I gotta mention. Rad Racer for the NES. That was a rad game. It was made by Squaresoft.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Before they, only put out Final Fantasy games. And RC Pro-Am. RC Pro-Am is sick.
Yeah.
That's just a fun little arcade racing game where you're just racing around these loops as an RC car, picking up, oil slicks and speed ups and stuff. That was really cool. Another Super Nintendo racing game that I played a ton of was Top Gear 2.
Oh,
Gear 2.
Yeah.
And was it based on the show Top Gear, or no relation?
Guess? I don't know. I was a kid. I didn't even know that Top Gear was a show back then. A series for the Brits. So that game had a password entry thing.
Yes, password entry.
Because it had a progression through these stages that you go through, and you gain money based on your finishes that you can use to upgrade your car between levels. So that was really cool. But I figured out the level select code by accident. I don't quite remember how to do it, but it involved entering in a really long password and then having the number of the level you wanted to go to at the end, backing out, going back into the password screen and doing something else, something weird like that. But I just messed around with the password so much that I figured it out.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So that was really, really weird. And you guys, were more N64 kids back then, but I was more of a PlayStation kid. So there were a couple other games that I played. Need for Speed Most Wanted. Or no, not Most Wanted. Hot Pursuit.
Hot Pursuit.
For the PS1 was awesome.
Yeah, Hot Pursuit was awesome. I played Hot Pursuit on the PC.
Mm-hmm.
Scratch it. Yeah. Actually, I think Need for Speed Hot Pursuit might have been one of the first or maybe not Hot Pursuit, but a PC Need for Speed game was actually the first racing game I think I ever played. But one of the really old ones.
Yeah.
I think Hot Pursuit might have been my first Need for Speed game.
Yeah. Because the first Need for Speed game I think was for the 3DO.
Damn.
So, and it was called The Need for Speed.
The Need,
The Need
for Speed.
Yeah. But Hot Pursuit was sick because it was, pretty fun racing, but it also had, like, the cop mode where you, like, lay down spike strips and stuff to, like, catch the racer.
Lay down the law!
I can't remember if the first Need for Speed had the competitive mode where one player is playing as the cop and one player is playing as the...
Hot Pursuit did, yeah.
Yeah. I just can't remember if that was in there from the first Hot Pursuit or if that was in Hot Pursuit 2.
It always felt...
Hot Pursuit 2 was, like, a 360 game, so...
It always felt great to get away when you're playing Hot Pursuit.
Or maybe Hot Pursuit 2 was a different game, and then they remade it and released a new... I know they released a new Need for Speed game called Need for Speed Hot Pursuit for the 360 era, I believe.
Before we go too far into the future, we should go into the past a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Star Wars Podracer.
Yeah, Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racing was... I'm going to say it's the most interesting movie tie-in game I've ever seen, because they basically just took the one section of the film, the pod race, and decided... Yeah, you know what? We're just going to make an entire racing game around this sequence. Like, there's not I can't actually think of any other film tie-in adaptation games where they've just decided to kind of, instead of just making a sort of game that's trying to be the whole film or something, that they're just like, no, we're going to focus on making a game about this one aspect of the film. And honestly, the game, like, they knocked it out of the park. Yeah. They made a very, very good racing game in the sort of like futuristic, like hover racer genre, which also includes things like the F-Zero series and the Wipeout series, to a lesser extent Extreme G, which I mentioned. But it was really well done, and it had kind of an interesting control scheme, interesting maps. And you get to play as the various characters in the film, as well as others, racing your crazy futuristic pod racing thing. And I mean, that was like the best part of Star Wars Episode 1, so...
I'm just glad their tie-in game wasn't some sort of babysit Jar Jar game.
So, I also played Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racing, but I played the GBA version.
Oh God,
help you.
That's not as good. It was rough. And, like, this is coming from, like, somebody who was, pretty young when they played it, and even then I knew, this is rough.
Yep.
Yeah, racing games on the GBA, I don't know.
Hey, they ported the SNES version of F-Zero to it.
Okay.
Pretty good. Okay. And I haven't actually played the GBA. I haven't played Mario Kart Advance, but maybe that's good. I don't know.
I didn't really like it.
Okay.
Let me put it this way: this is probably the first time you've ever heard me talk about the Game Boy Advance Mario Kart.
Well, nobody does. So
there's a reason for that.
Speaking of somewhat obscure Mario Karts, which I guess the advanced version is, me and Sean went to this arcade in Richmond once.
Yep.
And and there was a Mario Kart arcade.
Oh, was it Mario Kart GP?
Sit down. It was a sit down arcade, so probably Mario Kart GP. I don't remember. And we were playing it, and it was like surprisingly difficult.
Yeah.
And then I crashed. I mean, I crashed my kart a lot, but the game also crashed.
Oh, that's no good.
Yeah, it freaking blue screened on me, and then just boot up like like it was DOS or something.
Wow.
Mario enters the Matrix.
So I count that as a win in my books. That's definitely a podium finish.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah, but did you play against Pac-Man? Pac-Man was in that game, I think.
Oh,
I feel like there was some strange cars. Like, was that the one with the Mercedes-Benz in it?
I mean, they put Mercedes-Benz in
that was the 3D.
No,
they put it in the 3DS.
3DS? That was so stupid.
Yeah. Oh my god. Just Sean just trying to reach for chips without making a ton of noise.
Yeah.
And then
Do you
everyone,
want a chip, Sean?
and then everyone
Yeah,
everyone just goes dead silent.
I'm gonna grab I'm gonna take a minute for these chips.
Alright, grab some chips.
That's hilarious.
Alright. Before we get on too far from, I mentioned F-Zero, which is a series that, like, me and everybody else wants to come back.
Oh, everyone,
Oh, yeah.
Everyone wants more F-Zero games.
Yeah. I played some of the Super Nintendo F-Zero, but I played a lot more F-Zero GX for the GameCube.
Yeah, I think GX is really where the series... it's where it really
It's the
shot.
last game they released.
Yeah. But also, I mean, it was... I'm going to be
awesome.
honest. The SNES one, it was not that good.
Oh, the SNES one's fun.
I don't know. Maybe I just didn't play it during the right time period.
But yeah, F-Zero GX. My favorite thing to do in that game was, like, you could, like, do a weird, like, spin thing around your car, which you could use to, like, push other cars. So I would constantly just, like, try to knock people out using that and damage their cars. And
Nice.
It also had the freaking story mode, which was super hard. I didn't get very far in it, and it's something that I've been meaning to go back to for a very long time because that game's so good. And that game,
I think like even beating the story mode at all is an achievement.
yeah, like a lot of people talk about just how difficult that game is, and that game also had great music.
Well, and as I recall too, the AI is completely busted in that game, especially like later in the story mode. Like it cheats really badly.
Yes.
I mean,
rubber banding in racing games.
It's an old staple. I don't know. Have you guys played any like really weird racing games? Because I played one called Sled Storm,
Sled Storms?
where you were racing around snowmobiles, and it was weird, really weird because it had like a upgrade progression system. It wasn't like a kart racer. I don't believe it had items or anything. It was just really weird.
I remember playing this one game for the PC where it was actually quite a funny game. So I cannot remember the name of it yet, but essentially you're flying around in space towards these objectives. It's clearly a racetrack of some kind, but there's junk flying around. And so you're trying to collect this junk to upgrade your car, but at the same time your car is constantly breaking down, and so some of the junk that you've collected is flying off of you, and so people later on in the race can grab the parts in order to try and boost their car better and keep up with you.
Well, that's cool.
And it was quite an old game. I think I must have played it around 2005-ish, maybe even later than that, maybe 2008. Yeah, that was super fun. I remember when you're at the front of the pack and you're flying super fast, it was quite difficult to pick up the good pieces of junk, and it was quite easy to just smash into things to cause your junk to fly everywhere. So usually I would assume a position in second. I call this the blue shell strategy. Assume the position in second and try and grab the goodies and make a dash for it at the end. Yeah, that was a fun game.
Cool.
I'm not sure it's that weird, but I remember there was this one game. It was called Monster Truck Madness.
All right.
And basically it was just... I mean, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Basically, you raced monster trucks. And, yeah, it was on the N64, and I think it was also on PC, maybe? But it was I think I played it on the N64. It was interesting. It was a bit weird sometimes, but yeah, I don't actually remember enough about that game, to be honest. It exists. I also remember this other weird game that was on, I think, the GameCube. I literally can't even remember the name of it, but it was like an off-road, like rally racing game. And so you'd choose like a truck, okay? And these were all like licensed actual trucks. Like you could get like an F-150 or like a Toyota, what's that? The RAV4. Like you could...
So, pickup trucks.
Pickup trucks, yeah. And then you could like, modify them with like, put a better winch on it or, upgrade your tires. The weird thing about this game though is that literally it's just like, I swear it's just like, here's a hillside. Here's just like like there isn't even really a track. Like it's just like, it's like someone took like some aerial topography and they were just like importing it from some database, and then they were like, yeah, just race on this.
They got their wires crossed between aerial photography and level geometry.
Yeah, but yeah, it didn't even make sense. Like there weren't tracks. The races were awful. Like it was as if someone had taken real mountainsides and just arbitrarily threw like marker points and were like, just drive around them and find them. And sometimes it's hard to find where the actual checkpoints are. So you'd be just driving around lost with your like aftermarket modified actual pickup truck. And then you'd like flip over into a ditch that you didn't see and then have to like use the winch to right yourself. Which, don't get me wrong, that's an interesting concept for a racing game, but it was weird.
Okay.
Yeah. It didn't... I don't think it really worked that well, to be honest.
Huh. Alright. So, in terms of, like, more realistic racing games, like, the last racing game I played a bunch of, excluding Mario Karts, I bought it and, like, didn't even necessarily want it, but I bought it as part of the Xbox Live chat pad bundle. And this was Project Gotham Racing 4. It was this bundle that came with a year of Xbox Live, a Xbox 360 chat pad, and the game, and it was only like, $10, $15 more than a year of Xbox Live normally, so I thought, hey, what the hell? And I actually played a ton of that game. That game is really, really fun. You can race cars as well as bikes, and naturally, handled differently. And how in a racing game, if you bump cars against each other, depending on the damage modeling, and you just bump off each other, right? Maybe you push somebody around. You could mess up people on bikes real bad by slamming into them. And the game also had you earned kudos for doing sick, race stuff. Like, if you drifted a bunch, you got a bunch of kudos. If you did wheelies, there was a huge variety of cars you could play. The worst part about it was there were some, classic roadsters. The, really long cars where you're sitting kind of in the back with a long kind of nose. And these cars handled like garbage in the game because they kind of handled it realistically. And there were a couple races that were just these really long races with some really fucked up turns that you could only use the roadster on, and they were challenge courses. So you would just trying to beat these things, going it basically is the game that I learned. Sometimes you need to brake. You can't just play all racing games like the Mario Kart and just have constantly on the gas the entire time. But yeah, it was just this 12-minute long to get the bronze medal or whatever, and I couldn't even get that on some of these races just because I would be spinning out constantly. I think one of them was even in bad weather conditions too.
This reminds me of that minigame from Mario Party 2 where you were racing on a slot track car, and it just seemed as if though the best strategy would be to hold down the gas because there's no movement. There's only gas and brakes. And
you
that
would
was
spin out, right?
Yeah, and you'd spin out if you were going too fast around the corners.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where it really hit me. That that was the closest mechanic that I've seen to real life. Let me tell you, don't take a corner too fast.
Okay, I found the name of that game. It is 4x4 Evolution 2, I believe.
All right.
Yeah, not actually a good game. I don't recommend playing it. But yeah, I think honestly, like everything you're saying about Project Gotham Racing, this is basically why I mostly play arcade racing games. If I wanted a real racing experience, I'll just go drive an actual car, because I just don't like realistic racing games.
Well, like I was kind of in the same boat, but playing Project Gotham 4, like that actually had a really good progression. Like, where the earlier cars that you drive, like, they handle a bit more like arcadey racers in that, like, they can't go all that fast, so you can take corners fairly, like, hold the gas, and, you know, they handled really nicely. And then as you progressed, you got to the faster and faster cars, and so you had to incorporate, you know, driving a bit smarter throughout the game as you got these faster and faster and faster cars. And so
that sounds brilliant.
Yeah, like sometimes I've jumped into, you know, a racing game, gone to like quick play, picked, you know, one of the fastest cars or whatever, and you just spin out every corner because you don't know how to, you know, what you got to do for that specific, you know, speed of car. But yeah, the progression was pretty good in that. Same with like Need for Speed Underground. I played a decent amount of that game.
I love Need for Speed Underground.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that Need for Speed Underground, I feel like that one hit a good middle ground between something more like an arcade racer and something trying to be a bit more realistic.
Yeah.
Also, you could customize your car, and I actually really enjoyed that in that game.
Yeah. It's because of Need for Speed Underground, despite not knowing really anything about the real life car, I kind of want to get a Mitsubishi Lancer.
Oh,
that's the car that I drove in Underground for a while.
Nice.
One of the most interesting racing mechanics to me, especially with how it gets abused, is the out-of-bounds systems that they use.
Right.
And most often the out-of-bounds system is the primary way that speedrunners, or people just generally looking to get illegal amounts of edge on their competitors, would use to fly off the level at key points, and the poor programmers didn't account for people doing such things, and then the game thinks that you should be placed back on the map far ahead from where you actually flew off. And there's really been some impressive shortcuts that could be had in quite a few games that have that mechanic, everything from Mario Kart to I remember there was one in Lego Racer.
Yeah, shortcuts in those like arcade races were pretty cool. I'm a bit disappointed that it seems like the Mario Kart games they don't have shortcuts really anymore.
Yeah, they've really gone away from
like
including shortcuts.
The best they got is, you know, here's a corner. If you have a mushroom or a star, you can cut this corner. But like the little stairs in Daisy Plaza or whatever you go on, or the cannon in that one Mario Kart 64 map.
Yeah.
Maybe not cannon, but you know what I mean. Or you know, just like the alternate path in Wario's Gold Mine and stuff. Like that's cool stuff. That makes for a more dynamic race. And I can't really think of any.
Yeah, in Mario Kart specifically, what I really liked as well is that they would often give you a shortcut, but the shortcut path doesn't have items.
Yeah.
And so you have to consider whether you want an item. And, you know, if you're in the lead or if you're in a higher placement, then you're probably going to be more likely to try and take the shortcut, since you don't get very good items when you're leading. But yeah, interesting mechanics with the shortcuts. And will never forget the one shortcut in Mario 64, Rainbow Road, where you can fall off the level and land.
Yep, the one that I was talking about.
Yeah, the one that Sean literally brought up earlier in this podcast.
Oh my god, really?
Yep.
Yes.
Sometimes
You've entered the zone.
Sometimes I've entered the Angry Sun Zone.
Maybe you were in the phone zone.
I was in the phone zone.
The phone zone. Yeah, that is it, honestly such a fun, high risk, high reward shortcut. And there was definitely something satisfying about hitting that one. There was also another one in Wario Stadium where you could give yourself an illegal amount of bouncing and bounce yourself right over one of the walls. That definitely wasn't intended.
Yeah.
You could also, if you didn't make the jump at the end, you were fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, speaking of shortcuts, though, one of the things that I loved about, Mario Kart DS was the fact that in the time trial mode, you got an amount of mushrooms dependent on your kart's stats, because the karts had various amounts of stats, and one of them was items. So, for certain courses, it was correct to choose the ones that had a high item score, even though it might have less top speed, because you could take a sick shortcut. But other tracks, like you had more advantageous to use the better stats mobile and try for just a clean race. And also, I think the higher items ones also had better off-road stats too. So, it was, do I want to race super skillfully, or do I want to cheese the shit out of this course?
Yeah.
And you know what? Most people would refer to the game guides when figuring out where to ideally use the mushroom, or even a YouTube video. For my guide to utility on mushrooms, I refer to the likes of Terence McKenna and Paul Stamets.
All right. Yeah, no. But speaking of time trials and shortcuts, that's a great segue into one of my favorite racing games, Trackmania.
Oh,
Forever.
hell yes.
Actually,
Trackmania is super dope.
any
Trackmania,
Trackmania game, but the one I played so much of was Trackmania Forever. And that game is... It's one of the most like over the top arcade racers, quite literally. The physics in Trackmania are amazing.
Irrelevant.
You can ride walls, you can ride ceilings. Your car can just get so much air; it can jump at insane high speeds and just like soar.
Some of my favorite tracks from that game required you to do nothing but hit the accelerate. And if you did exactly that, you could finish the whole circuit, meanwhile doing insane tricks that just leveraged the ridiculous physics of this game.
Yeah. A lot of track... Now, one of the things that sets Trackmania apart is that it is basically time trial only. It's time trial... It's pretty much time trials in single player. And if you play multiplayer, it's really just time, like there's no collision with the other players, and it's really just trying to get the best times on whatever the map is that you're playing in multiplayer. But a lot of maps, both the official maps and user-made maps, because Trackmania had a very in-depth track editor, they pretty much always had shortcuts all over the place. I really enjoyed actually playing the multiplayer online, because you would just have the most insane user-created maps, because not only could users design the map, they could import their own textures, they could import their own music, for better or worse.
I feel like there must have been countless Mario Kart remakes then.
Not really, actually.
Trackmania 2 was mostly dubstep.
Yeah.
Really awful, out-of-place dubstep.
Yeah, the music didn't always work. But overall, it was a really fun game with just the controls. Despite the physics being completely insane, the controls still felt really good and really tight, which is obviously critical to any racing game.
Yeah.
And there's no racing game that nails like absurd physics. I feel like quite like Trackmania. I also really liked the Trackmania United Forever, like track, because there was like a free version and then there was like a sort of paid version, and I did end up buying the paid version, Trackmania United, which had some additional sort of themes, and the car is handled a bit differently. So there was this like crazy, almost like kind of Outrun styled, like tropical laser vibe levels, and I really loved those ones in particular because the car was even faster. There was tubes that were a track element, and you could spin around them, and I always love that. Every good racing game has that. Yeah, I don't know. It's just such a fun, like, absurd racing game. Yeah, I love it. Any racing game where doing a loop-de-loop, like doing loop-de-loops is like a simple thing you'll do in the first level, and it only gets more insane from there, it has my vote.
Yeah. Trackmania is pretty dope. It's something that I could like lose myself in if I started playing it. So I haven't. Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah, and also like just the in-depth map editor. Although there were a lot of bad user-created maps, there were also a lot of just incredible user-created maps with really interesting ideas that you just wouldn't see in most other games. Mm-hmm. Partly that's because some of them are just like a joke.
Yeah. All right. You brought up, music in racing games with Trackmania. Now, I'm going to play for you the best music track in any racing game.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Daytona USA has the best fucking music, man. Yeah. And another series that also has amazing music that I've never gotten into and never had the opportunity to try is Ridge Racer. I really want to try Ridge Racer.
Yeah, I haven't played any Ridge Racer.
That's a shame.
It's a PlayStation series. Never really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Never really got into PlayStation. I have a PS3. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've gotten into a PlayStation racing series, Wipeout.
Oh yeah, Wipeout. Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about this a little bit on a previous podcast, I think, but I love Wipeout. I have Wipeout HD and Fury on the PS3, and it's a really great racing game. It's in the futuristic sort of racing style of like an anti-gravity racer. It's very similar to F-Zero or the Star Wars Episode 1 Podracer that we talked about earlier, but it really nailed it. It's got a great music selection as well. More of almost kind of a more dance oriented selection, but it's really, really fun. And the thing I like about it is that it's very much an extremely to the arcade side of like the sort of arcade control spectrum, but it is a tough game. Some arcade racers, yeah, the controls are easy, right? But not Wipeout. Wipeout is an arcade racer with a very interesting sort of shoulder button control system for doing a lot of the more advanced moves, and it demands a very high level of precision. Mm-hmm. By default, when you play the game on easy, it comes with like an autopilot assist because you literally can't even drive without just crashing into the walls constantly when you first start playing the game.
Yeah.
That's how difficult it is.
Yeah, I tried one of the Wipeout games at your place, I think, and I got second to last on the first race, and it's just
wow.
Which that was probably intentional.
And it was probably with the pilot assist.
Yeah, because one thing one of the instructors for my game programming degree worked at EA for a time on one of the Need for Speed games, and we were talking about difficulty, and he mentioned how the AI in one of those games, the rubber banding was made such that you, no matter how bad you were doing, the next car in front of you was always attainable to pass them. They would drive sloppier to ensure that you always had somebody to try and pass.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because rubber banding is certainly a thing in these games.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every major series has some rubber banding AI. If you're unfamiliar with that, basically it just means that when you're doing really well, the AI gets unfair speed boosts, and if you're doing really poorly, they get speed kind of demerits.
Yeah, it's a form of adaptive AI, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not very... In some games, it can be extremely unforgiving, though. To the point where, to win races, you might intentionally do badly in the first lap or two, just to avoid being completely crushed by the rubber banding.
Yeah.
Which I feel really... if you have to do that as a viable strategy, I feel like there is something wrong with the design of your game, to be honest. But it is... certainly some of the Mario Karts have had that in spades.
Yeah, well, the rubber banding is super evident with the items, where the better you're doing, the worse items you get. You're not going to get a star when you're in first place, because that's a super powerful item. All the times you won't even get a mushroom. Though I have once gotten in one of the games I got I think it was Mario Kart 7. I got the 7 or whatever in first place. It was really weird. Wait, what? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
The Hail Mary of all items.
Yeah.
Which item do you get?
The item button.
Yeah, I think actually Mario Kart 7 specifically, I remember that the items in that one, you seemed much more likely to get high value items in first or second in that game.
I just didn't play much of that because it made my hands hurt playing that game. Because just the control scheme of it, and constantly having to, the bumpers to drift and stuff, and maybe I was just tensing up super hard playing it or something, but it just hurt my hands after a while. But alright. 3, 2, 1. Favorite Mario Kart track, go.
Waluigi's Pinball.
Good choice.
My gears are turning. There's a lot of Mario Kart that I've played.
For me, Delfino Plaza.
Oh, man. You know what? I also gotta say Dolphin Shoals.
Dolphin Shoals is pretty good.
Dolphin Shoals is so good.
From Mario Kart 8.
Yeah, the way that sax hits as you come out of the cave, it's so perfect.
Yeah, and the how the music changes when you're in the water.
And the music changing when you're underwater, it's amazing. I love it.
For me, I'm trying to give you guys the exact name of this course so I'm not mangling it. It's from the N64. It is the DK course.
DK's river or something, or...
Right? I'm trying to remember the name.
It's the level with the river crossing, though, yeah?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
So that was one of my favorite courses. DK's Jungle Parkway. And the other one that I also liked, also from that game, was Peach's level, which is not Mario Raceway, I don't think. Actually, it might have been.
The Royal Raceway?
Yeah, Royal Raceway. Yeah, that one was cool just because, hey, they have the same castle, basically, from Super Mario 64 there.
Yeah.
And I was like...
Here's the asset.
Yep, they threw it in there. And there was me smashing into that fucking castle dozens of times, trying to be like, there must be a secret inside here. To no avail.
Yeah. One Mario Kart game we haven't brought up yet is Mario Kart Wii. That's my personal favorite pick. Because I loved the way the bikes handled.
Yeah, the bikes were really cool in that game.
It varied up the racing because you could do the wheelie to, sacrifice pretty much all of your turning power, and if you just got regularly bumped while you were wheeling, you'd get messed up, but you got a bit of speed boost for doing that. So it made the racing, like you had more to do in racing, and again, fantastic selection of tracks, the new ones as well as the retro ones.
Oh man, I love Koopa Cape.
Koopa Cape is sick.
Koopa Cape is one of my favorite tracks from that game.
Yeah,
it's so fun,
and
you get to go underwater in a tube.
It's got tubes. You love tubes.
I love tubes. Every good racing game has tubes.
And the focus on like the tricks and like all the ramps and stuff, it was just such a fun game.
You know what was a real interesting game for me was Mario Kart Double Dash, with the with having two racers in the same cart, and therefore having up to 2 items, having different carts handle much differently. It definitely put variety on the Mario Kart series that to me stands out uniquely, and I really like that game a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because like that was the first. Was that the first one where you could choose what cart you drove?
I think it was.
Unless the GBA one had that, I think it was the first one.
Don't remember.
Players can switch anytime. Now multiplayer in the same cart was pretty interesting.
Oh, that was like a freaking like Sonic the Hedgehog thing, where it's just like one person is having a way funner time than the other.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
But that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I like Double Dash was fine, but I actually think it's one of my least favorite Mario Karts for me, just because I felt like the controls were a bit weird in Double Dash.
They were pretty fun. The one thing I remember
they
about Double Dash is that like going off road without anything like wasn't as much of a penalty. I remember. Oh, what was that? Like the DK Mountain, specifically. Like there were like off-road sections that you just drift on. It didn't really matter. But that level was really sick. Where you got shot out. Like you went up, and you got shot out of the cannon.
Yes.
Yeah. Going up the mountain. Then down the mountain.
The game had some cool levels. Something about the way the controls were felt a bit loose compared to a lot of the other Mario Karts to me. But.
And then they also had the unique items. There was the fireballs, the giant bananas, the Bowser shells, the eggs, the hearts.
Yeah,
the bob-ombs.
The characters having the unique items. That was pretty cool.
Okay, so another racing game that I spent a lot of time with that I really enjoyed was Burnout Paradise. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I really like it because it's a bit different than a lot of the other racing games we've talked about, in that it is a single-player racing game. It's not a multiplayer racing game at all. And it's really more focused on, I would say, exploration and the progression through the game. Some of the Need for Speed games are kind of like that too, but Burnout Paradise really nailed it in my mind. Basically, the concept with Burnout Paradise is that there's sort of like an open world city, Paradise City, and each race takes place on a particular circuit around different parts of the city. And some races might be bigger than others. And it's kind of a cool concept that I like, because you get to know the city over time, but the tracks are always changing. And so you're able to kind of learn the different areas of the city to perform well. And you're able to learn the shortcuts in the different areas of the city. But the interesting thing is that sometimes those shortcuts only apply to certain routes through the city. And even the turns themselves are going to be slightly different depending on how you're coming into and going out of various areas. And I just really liked that just for a single player racing experience, it really kept it interesting all throughout. It also had like kind of a cool exploration aspect, a bit of a collectathon where there are billboards around the city, and the billboards, if you crash through the billboards, that basically counts as collecting the collectible. And so there's sort of a side game in addition to just kind of like, working through all the races, there's sort of a side game of just exploring the city and finding every billboard to destroy. And it's a lot of fun. And also it's pretty hard sometimes because some of the billboards are really obvious, but they're actually hard to get to because you might have to find a hidden jump and hit that hidden jump at the right angle at high speed in order to crash into the billboard to take it out. And it just had like a nice progression with like a lot of cars that were just fun to drive. And as you get later in the game, similar to some of the things we were talking about with other racing games like the Gotham racing game, definitely the upper tier cars are harder to actually manage. Just their difficulty in terms of driving skill required goes up, but their top speed goes up as well. So that's obviously a really common mechanic in a lot of racing games that are more single player focused. And I really liked Burnout Paradise because for me it perfectly walked the line between being a fun arcade racing game and being set in a more of a real world ish setting.
Yeah.
And so that was one of my favorites. I spent a lot of time with that game. It was a lot of fun.
There was multiplayer in that game.
Was there?
Yeah, I played at your house once.
Oh.
It was like hot seat multiplayer, and you like hit billboards and stuff.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like weird, like one-shot mini games almost.
Oh, yeah, that's weird. Yeah, you know what? And I barely remember it because it was weird.
There we go.
There's a game that's coming back to me because of the nostalgia. It's the one we played with Matt with the Benny Hill music and the...
Oh, Excite Truck?
Yes,
Excite Truck. Oh, that was such a weird game.
Yeah.
I'll never hear the Benny
The
Hill
sequel to
music
Excite Bike.
without thinking about that game and the shenanigans we had playing that.
Man, that game was hard to control, honestly.
It seriously was.
Yeah, it was crazy though.
Yeah, that was great.
Actually, speaking of crazy games to control, San Francisco Rush.
Oh, I love San Francisco Rush.
2049.
2049, hell yeah.
As well. Like, yeah. This one campground that me and my parents would go camping to all the time, had a San Francisco Rush machine. And so, like, I never got good at it, though.
It was a tough...
Yeah.
San Francisco Rush 2049 was a tough game. And, yeah. One of the things I really loved about that game is that it actually had, like, some interesting secrets. Mm-hmm. Like, there were secret trick areas that you could find. And, like, there was this one section that had a whole... almost like a skate park for cars hidden on a hillside that you would never go to normally.
Yeah.
And you could just mess around and jump your car off big jumps and go off like cool tricks and stuff, which was really fun, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you could play it at the arcade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just the way that they had the different car difficulties, and it's like, you know, dangerous, you know, and
yeah,
I can't. What were they all? I can't remember them. But it was just the way the announcer announced it.
Oh, racing game announcers.
It was so good.
Really good.
Like you get hype. Like you got hype during your car selection. That's how good this announcer was.
They get you early.
Oh my god. Okay, so speaking of racing games played in arcade, there was one other racing game that I played a little bit of at that particular arcade, and it was a time, let's say. It was called Hard Driving.
Okay.
And oh man, it was one of the first examples of polygonal. It was a polygonal game in 1989.
Oh wow.
And there was a speed track and a trick track. And the trick track had a loop-de-loop that you had to, you know, be going fast enough to go over. And it had, like, a stick shift as well. And if you even bumped into another car, you get sent flying and your car would explode. It's a freaking rough game. But again, it was one of the first 3D games, so it's kind of a time capsule in that way. Sean, I know you want to talk about the driver games.
Yes, Driver. When I first played Driver, I couldn't make it past the tutorial. At first. And then I came back to it. Yeah, that was one of my very earliest video game experiences, actually. And I remember playing it so late that I got in trouble. So there was some good memories from that game. I played it for Windows, specifically. And that was one of the first games that I played after putting my computer together. So I had to A, learn how to put this computer together, B, learn how to install software, and C, how to troubleshoot that software when nothing appeared to go right. And Driver was one of the first games that I managed to make it work. Good times indeed.
Yeah, another racing game that I really enjoyed, although it was not popular for very long. It was a game called Split Second.
Oh, right, yeah.
The Split Second was kind of interesting because it had... so there was a couple things about it. First, the single-player campaign was basically a fake reality TV show, which was just ridiculous. It was completely over the top, and it was amusing. I liked it. But the main thing about Split Second is that it was interesting in that it had a sort of combative element, but it wasn't traditional items. So you build a meter by doing tricks or drafting or things like that, and then you use this meter to trigger events that are in the level. At the bare minimum, some of these events are things like that might be reusable, like say logs falling off a truck or something that then can get in the way of your opponents, and or just dropping things off a helicopter, like an explosion off a helicopter, just and sort of like cool. And so they're kind of cool action events that are also basically combative plays to try and stop your stop your opponents and hinder them, or actually to open shortcuts. And that was a really cool idea. And some of the set pieces just got kind of insane. Like there's one race course that is set in an oil refinery, and a lot of the events that you trigger like explosions. And at one point there's like this big event you can trigger there, I think, for like a whole refinery stack just like explodes and falls over and like permanently, and a lot of the big events permanently alter the course.
Wasn't there a dam breach in the game too?
Yes, probably one of the biggest set pieces in the game. There's one course that takes place on a dam, and you can blow up the dam, and then the course changes completely once the dam explodes.
Damn.
Yeah, it was a really cool concept for kind of an alternative to traditional items. Mm-hmm. I liked it, but I don't think it was very popular. I don't think it sold well, and
it came out. I think it came out fairly close to Blur, which was another game that was kind of in the same vein of like more realistic cars, but in like the kind of kart racer, like shit is happening on the track stuff. I think Blur might have actually even had traditional items.
Blur was basically trying to be a kart racer, like with items, but with actual cars.
Yeah.
Whereas Split Second took a slightly different approach of also being like, fairly realistically styled with actual cars, arcade racing mechanics, but instead of items that feel out of place, you trigger these events that are more like cinematic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I gotta say, like, the game was beautiful to look at. It was a very, especially, you know, when you're triggering these big events, like, it really does feel like a movie climax on your race course. So really cool.
I think I either watched you play it or play it with you.
Yeah, we might have played it a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember it because it had online multiplayer as well, and it worked pretty well actually. It was a good game. It just didn't have much staying power. I think part of that was because it didn't really have. Once you had gone through the campaign, yeah, it did have multiplayer online, but ultimately, the game just didn't have quite as much staying power as a lot of other racing games, I would say. It was like, it's a really fun game while it lasts, but it doesn't have as much depth to it. So,
It's made by Disney.
yeah, it was made by Disney, which was also, that was weird because I don't think Disney really ventured into gaming as much.
They tried a couple of times
yeah.
and shut shit down.
Yeah. None of the,
Including, like, they canceled this really cool sounding Pirates of the Caribbean game where it was gonna be, you know, an action adventure game in the vein of
Jack Sparrow in the Quest for the Rum?
It's not quite.
Yeah, but yeah, although it had a lot of positive reviews from critics, yeah, it was a commercial failure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, it only sold 86,000 copies.
Jesus, really?
That's
okay,
right.
but that's in its first couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
Still,
That's still pretty bad.
it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
As my dog would
and
say.
and it's funny because I think that they had a second game planned like before the first one was even announced, and then they canceled it almost as soon as the game got released.
Yeah.
Because the sales were so bad, which was actually really sad because I think that Split Second, although I just said Split Second didn't have much like staying power to it, I really liked it as a concept. I don't think any other game has even tried to rip off their idea of having events being triggered, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that.
At least not like events triggered by the players.
Yeah.
Some games have, like, for example, like Rumble Volcano in Mario Kart, like that the track changes fairly dramatically, like as the race progresses. But
Yeah, but like, you know, it's pretty funny to be in third place and then you trigger a dam collapse which literally destroys the cars in first and second, and then you just roll on through after the through the ruins of this dam collapse, which is totally I'll note the dam collapse trigger was actually one of the most dangerous because it probably made one of the longest sections of track just be destroyed of any of the big set pieces in the game. Like, the damn course was very dangerous. And you would be guaranteed that someone would trigger it every race.
That sounds so cool.
So, would you call Split Second an underrated game? I
would, actually.
Awesome.
Now that I think about it. Split Second's probably the most underrated racing game I've played.
There we go.
I had fun for it. I had fun with it for a split second. I mean, that game was all over the gaming news for a very short time.
Yeah.
So, nominative determinism strikes again.
Yep.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
Very quickly.
Yeah. We prefer our arcade racers and kart racers, I think, a bit more on this podcast.
I suppose, like, one more, like, realistic driving game every 8 years or so probably keeps me satiated.
Yeah.
Because, like, I mean, look at some of the Forza Horizon games. Those games look like they might be quite a bit of fun. Trying to play those, but I just don't have a device that could play them right now.
Yeah. I find it amusing that we've made this episode about racing games and literally not one of us has brought up Gran Turismo.
No.
I mean, I played a little bit of Gran Turismo 2. The problem, I never owned it. So I only played it at like my cousin's house. And that game there's a lot in that game. A lot.
Yeah, I never really got into them either.
So,
again, PlayStation franchise.
On the other side of the fence for me, I never got into Gran Turismo either.
But yeah, I hope everyone's enjoyed this very rapid and
swerving and turning segment of
entertainment. This isn't working.
Nope, no, it's not. It's like there's a banana in your tailpipe right
now. We've spun out.
Yeah, spun out of control. Lakitu needs to get us back on track.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Angry Sun Zone. You can find us on YouTube with some videos.
As always, you can always reach out to us on Twitter at Angry Sun Zone and at our Outlook account, angrysunzone@outlook.com. Send us an email, send us a DM if you want to chat about, racing games that you think we missed and that we should check out.
Yeah, I hope everyone has a great race ahead of them, and that'll be us crossing the finish line.
Yeah, it's a photo finish.
Cheers, everyone.